I'm your host, Matt Miller, and welcome to Season 2 of You're Still Doing That? If you love the podcast and want to see it continue, go to www.yourstilldoingthat.com and leave a tip. If you have a lifelong passion you'd like to share, come on the show. Go to www.yourstilldoingthat.com and sign up to become a part of the podcast family. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for fun videos to see what's coming up next. On with the show. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. I'm talking with Rob Kassees. He is one of the hosts of 1001 Album Complaints podcast. Rob and his friends get together each week to talk trash or talk hype about an album. I really think that's such a great idea, Rob. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt.
Rob and I are going to be talking about a few of our favorite albums. But Rob, one thing I like to do is when I research before a podcast, I usually just do a general Google search of someone. Sure. And, some people have, a big digital footprint, and then sometimes I have to really hunt. But it's interesting to see other people with the same name and how they come up. So I've got your name came up a little bit. I'm going to see if you're one of the following people. You ready?
Sure.
All right. Did you play defensive back for college in Ohio, the Kenyan Owls?
No. Sadly, I did not do that.
I was wondering. I was like, I don't think the time fits, but there you go. Second one is on a Google search of your name. I came across a podcast called This Must Be the Place. And somebody was talking about the Talking Heads and MTV back in the day. Was that you?
Geez, that must have been me because I'm a huge Talking Heads fan. I got to be honest. I've guested on a lot of podcasts.
Right? I was thinking,
that name isn't like ringing I feel like I would know it if that was the name, because that's probably my favorite Talking Heads song. But
right, I could not.
Been me.
Yeah, I could not get a year for when that podcast was placed. I couldn't see that anywhere, but I thought that was kind of cool. And then I sure hope this is you, because it sure sounds like you. On a LinkedIn, I found that there was a Rob Kassees, who is a Duke University MBA graduate, scientific author with high-level management strategy experience, is building intuitive product solutions for real estate, is also a world traveler and proficient in Chinese. Is that you?
That is
me.
My, yeah. You're embarrassing me, but yes. Yeah. That's some nice corporate speak I wrote there.
It's great corporate speak, man. If you can see, I'm a big Duke fan. I always show that up there for the Tar Heel fans.
Go
if I ever
Blue
get
Devils,
to talk to any of those, that's right.
When I wear a Duke t-shirt out in the world, even outside of America, I get the most comments on that. People have a really strong opinion about that team around the world.
Yeah, Duke really is a world brand, isn't it?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I've worn any Duke gear outside of North Carolina, but I should try that the next time I'm out.
And are you based in Durham?
Well, I'm in North Carolina.
Okay,
so cool. I'm about an hour south of Durham, but
nice. Yeah, beautiful state.
Yeah. So maybe you can indulge me. According to my software analytics, I've had 2 people in China listen to the podcast. So it would be wonderful in Chinese if you could say, thank you for listening to the You're Still Doing That podcast.
Jeez, I got to look up the word podcast, Matt. You're really putting me on the spot here.
Oh, I don't know. Is there? I guess there's a Chinese word for podcast. Radio show.
你们现在听一个 You're Still Doing That podcast. 谢谢.
That's awesome, man. I was sure hoping that was you on that LinkedIn search, because I was like, oh my goodness.
For a Western white guy to learn Chinese, it's to live in Asia, as I've done periodically, and to learn Chinese is a constant uphill battle and a struggle of people laughing at you, but it's been a fun experience.
I bet you do get laughed at quite a bit. That's a whole nother
Sure.
podcast of living in
That's the
foreign
game.
countries. All right, Rob. So we're gonna get into some albums, but let's start at the beginning. Where
Yeah.
were you born, and where did you grow up?
I am from Wilmington, Delaware. It's kind
Yeah,
of almost a suburb of Philadelphia, quite a
yeah,
small
yeah.
place. But so I grew up there, went to high school. I went to University of Delaware for undergrad. And
Nice.
I think in part because I didn't go away for college, I just said, I got to get out of here. And right after college, I drove all the way across the country to San Francisco. And I've been in California and abroad ever since.
Right. Well, California is where I was born, L.A. County.
Oh,
So
okay,
quite a
cool.
bit south, quite a bit south of you guys, but
Sure.
that's where I spent the first decade of my life was out there. All right,
Yeah,
man.
nice.
So let's talk about your how you got into music. What
Yeah.
got you into music when you were younger?
My parents were big music fans growing up, so I really was raised on the classics. There was always music playing in the home. My mother had a guitar. She wasn't a proficient player, but she had played at some point, and so there was a piano in the house, things like that. So they weren't really
Right.
actively playing musicians, but they loved music, and I grew up on the Beatles and Bob Dylan and Jimi Hendrix, and combine that with the rise of MTV.
Right. Right.
By
Right.
the time I
Yeah.
was 8, 9, 10, I was just watching MTV all day, every day, taking it all
No.
in. And
Yeah. I was trying to think of how old I was when I first saw MTV, and that was probably about that. My babysitter had MTV, and so she would watch it. So I'd get
yeah,
to watch it when I was over there during the summertime.
so I
What were?
just
Oh, go ahead,
got
sir.
no, please.
So I was gonna say, did you play any instruments growing up in school?
I went to a very small school that didn't have a music program, so the answer is
Oh,
no.
that is
But
small school.
yes, but I picked up guitar when I was 16, and have been
Yeah,
playing since then.
as is the story for a lot of great musicians.
Yeah,
They just pick it up. What was your major in college?
I majored in biology.
Biology. That's
Yeah,
far away from music there. Did
it
you
is. Yeah.
get to were you in any bands or play any gigs as you were growing up?
Yeah, of course. Well, I had this experience where I was the last of my small friend group to pick up the guitar. So
Yeah.
even though I was only maybe a year behind, I just felt like I was perilously late and behind the curve all the time. And so I think I was a little scared to get out there and play, even though I was playing and learning really fast in my teenage years. So I didn't have my first proper band until I was in my 20s when I
Gotcha.
moved to San Francisco. And part of what ultimately led me back to business school, believe it or not, away from my science career, was running that band and
Yeah.
feeling like that was my real skill set, even though it was just a weekend warrior
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
thing, that kind of leadership and writing on the whiteboard and organizing, and you're booking for the band and you're managing people's expectations, and
Yeah.
the band doesn't make any money, so there's no incentive system, and they're your
Right.
friends, so you can't fire them. So it's like a weird
Yeah.
version of trying to get a team to coalesce.
Yeah. You're right. There is a whole nother side to that than just playing your instrument.
Yeah.
Who were some of your early music influences? Who were you listening to growing up?
Well, I mentioned the classics like the Beatles and Bob Dylan, who were really I inherited from my parents. So love both of them. But I would say some of the first people I discovered on my own were David Bowie, the
Yeah.
kind of weird equals cool aesthetic, because I
Mm-hmm.
was a nerdy
Mm-hmm.
kid. That was really important
Yeah.
to me. And then in terms of the slightly more modern stuff, They Might Be Giants was a huge one for
Yeah.
me. Again, very strange,
Yep.
off kilter rock and
They're
roll.
a little off center. Yep.
Really spoke to me when I was 12, 13, 14. That was the first concert I ever went to. So bands like that kind of laid down the template, but also things like Nirvana. I was the perfect age when Nevermind came out. I think I
Yeah.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
12, and I bought that on cassette tape, and so I was engaging with the modern stuff too. But I would say, yeah, the ones I mentioned before were my big loves.
Yeah. Let's talk about your podcast, man.
Sure.
1001 album complaints.
Yeah.
Whose idea was that? How did it get started?
Yeah, so this is a group of very old friends, all from Wilmington, Delaware. We all grew up together and have played in various bands together. And so it started as a text string during the pandemic where we were missing hanging out with each other. And we were at that point a little bit geographically dispersed anyway.
Yeah.
We had lived, we were living in different parts of the country. And it just started by chatting about a song that somebody heard on the radio, probably at a grocery store. And like, what's
Right.
going
Right.
on with
Right.
this? What's going on with this? So somebody suggested, oh, we should do this as a podcast. And the premise should be based on the Robert Dimery book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. That'll give it a
Yes.
format. We'll pick albums from that book. We'll talk about them, and we'll try to recreate the conversations that musicians have in the van after the gig or at the bar.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. Yeah.
these are the
Yeah.
conversations I've been having my entire life over a beer.
Right.
Something comes on the jukebox, and whether you love it, hate it, whether you put it on or someone else did, it doesn't matter. There's always something to talk about, something to nitpick.
So my understanding is you guys have 1,001 podcast episodes.
Not quite there yet. We'll be
Almost
old,
there, but you got your albums
wizened,
picked
and
for you.
gray. Yes. Yeah. And, the list itself is a funny thing because it's gone through multiple iterations. It was a book that was published, I think, initially in the 90s.
Yeah.
It's had some updates since then. So things have fallen off, things have been added. There's probably going to be another
Yes.
update at some point.
Oh,
So
I'm
there's,
sure.
there's actually. So, yes, we're trying our best to hew as closely as possible to the list. But for instance, the paper copy I have only goes up to 2004. And so we have to consult internet lists
Yeah.
at times to do more modern stuff.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of material, safe to say.
Oh, it sounds like it, man. How often do you guys put out a podcast?
Every single week, we've been going strong for about 3 years now. So we've published around 160 episodes.
That is definitely going strong, man. That
Yeah.
the math the math is right there. You guys are doing great to keep it up for 3 years straight. How often do you I'm sure you get people that like I can't make it today and
Well,
things
this
like
was
that.
all baked into the strategy, Matt. And like I said, I'm kind of a organized personality, a strategic thinker. And I didn't really even want to do the podcast unless I knew we were going to do at least 100 episodes. I wanted
Right.
something that could really be lasting and that we could do consistently. And as you know, one of the hard parts is producing something consistently.
Yes. Yep.
And that can be a challenge at times. And so we mitigate that in a few ways. But one other thing I want to mention is that, not only do we just kind of gab about these records and joke about them, which we definitely do, but we really try to do a lot of research and tell the story behind them. And part of that is just because we all love doing that. And I find that learning more about the background of the record, how it was made, or what the artist was doing at that time, it always gives me more appreciation for the art.
Yes,
regardless of, my ultimate verdict. But we have structured it purposefully in such a way. We tape every single week, more or less without break. But we have a rotating group of co-hosts that can kind of share the work. So that makes it much easier to do that research every week and to kind of, so every week there's one host who's leading the research, telling the story. Other people just have to kind of listen, take notes, and their job is a little lessened. And then we rotate that.
Gotcha. So it's not just you hosting each week. It'll be someone else. And then
that's correct. Pretty much every week we do a switch. And I'd say approximately there are 4 of us that host, and there are 2 other guys, all close friends, all musicians, that join in as commentators. And occasionally we have guests too, but they kind of just join in with our format. We don't really do an interview thing with guests.
Oh, I love the format. That is great. Who picks the album? How do you guys decide which album you're going to do?
Well, to the wider world out there, we have a machine called the Albinator that no one's ever seen. That spins kind of like the Price is Right.
Yeah.
No, but in reality, it's just us each selecting what we want to dive into next and research, because the person who picks. So in other words, we each pick our own albums from the list without a lot of rules or caveats. But I should say that part of our goal is to discover new music ourselves, kind of stay in touch with that part of ourselves. As you get older, that becomes less of a priority in life.
Yeah.
And so this has just been a cool way to continue hearing new things. So interestingly, although it does appear often as very random, and that's what we say on the show oftentimes, that's just the randomness of us actually selecting what we think is interesting.
Yeah. But it's a good way to keep your friendship going too, and keep it in touch. If you don't have some sort of vehicle, then you can lose touch with folks.
Absolutely,
for
absolutely. That's a
sure.
huge part of it as well. And we're such a tight knit group from we went to high school and college together, and spent time in bands after college. And now
Yeah,
everyone's got jobs and families and lives in different parts of
yeah,
the country. So this is a great way to stay in touch.
yeah. Yeah. The job and family sure get in the way of podcasting.
Yeah, they get away with everything, man. Actually,
Uh, all right, so let's talk a few albums and let's see what you say about some of mine.
sure.
What was the first album or artist that you remember listening to and loving?
So I'm gonna say, man, that's a tough one. I already cited They Might Be Giants. I think of that as
Like your
the
like
first
I'm talking about like your earliest memory of you're like, oh, I really
earliest
like that band or that artist.
I can remember my father playing the Beatles, and not just the
Yeah,
record. I remember him having friends over and them getting together on some acoustic guitars. I think my father played harmonica and
yeah.
doing I've Just Seen a Face. And I have a real strong sense of memory of that from when I was real young. And that must
Uh,
have happened a few times, I would guess.
right. I
Stuff
have.
maybe, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've got my earliest ones is Elvis Presley. My mother was a huge Elvis Presley fan and even told me the story of getting grounded because her parents caught her with an Elvis Presley record in her
Oh,
room when she was a teenager, and that was a you can't have
yeah.
that in there.
Scandalous.
Scandalous. So I remember sneaking onto my brother's stereo system and putting in Jailhouse Rock. Uh,
Nice. Wow.
was when I was early. I heard a lot of the Bangles in the car growing up.
Okay.
And my mother was also a big Karen Carpenter fan. So I heard
Oh, yeah.
quite a lot of that growing up.
Oh, great.
What was the first album you ever remember having, either as a present or something like that? What was the first album you ever remember having?
So this is a little embarrassing, but I'm happy to share it. I went to the record store for the first time when I was 10, maybe,
Yeah.
and I purchased Dr. Feelgood by Motley Crue.
Nice. I love
And
it.
and I believe in the same trip I purchased Forever Your Girl by Paula Abdul. Now both were
I
being, you know,
love
marketed
it.
to me via MTV at the
Yes,
time.
they were. They both would have been on there. I've got a buddy who'd smile when he heard the Motley Crue. Man, that's great.
Yeah, so I love that stuff at the time. I like to think about that as the time before I really developed my own taste. It really was
Yeah, yeah,
just what
yeah,
MTV was telling me to like. Which, and by the way, those records are still pretty good. You know, they're fine.
yeah. No, definitely the Motley Crue. I was deep diving into them for a while last summer. The first album I ever got, my parents got me the Coasters,
Wow.
old screw 50s group, because
You
that's all
know,
that played in the car when I was in there. That's all that was allowed to be played was oldies.
your answers, because I mean, I don't know exactly how old you are, but we look pretty similar in age.
Yeah, I'm
You're doing some
47.
throwback picks here.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
I'm
3 years younger than
47.
you, but you're doing some
Yeah,
real throwbacks.
Elvis Presley. The first album, I bought two albums when I got a CD player. I had a CD player tape deck combo, and I guess it was about 93, 94, or maybe 92. I think it got to be 92 because I bought two albums the very first day I went to the record store. I was trying to remember the name of that store. It was in the mall. And the first album I got was for my girlfriend at the time to listen to together. And it was Yanni. If you can believe it. And then the other album I got was Boys to Men, Cooley High Harmony.
Oh, nice. Well, I
That
mean,
was my other one.
I grew up outside of Philadelphia, so I'm very
Yes.
attached to Boys to Men.
Yes. Yeah, I was a very big R&B guy through high school. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but even now I'm a huge funk and soul listener. Those seem to be my go-to choices when I'm searching for music.
Nice.
Uh, what were some of your favorite albums in your college day?
College to me was about getting into the jazzier side of things. So, listen to a lot of Steely Dan,
Yeah.
listen to Medeski, Martin, and Wood, the records they were putting out at the time, the one they had with John Scofield, A Go Go, I remember listening to quite a lot. Steely Dan. My favorite is Royal Scam, although they're all great. Maybe Herbie Hancock's Headhunters.
Yeah, Herbie Hancock. Now I listened to that as a music major. There were certain, certain people and albums that came our way, and Herbie Hancock was one of those
Sure.
that
Guys had
going
a hit
through.
in like 3 decades, three totally distinct genres, right?
Yes,
It's
that's
pretty
for
wild.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, I had three groups came to mind when I try to remember my college days. My all-time favorite is Cake, and that first album, Fashion Nugget, was that was a repeat for me quite a
Yeah.
lot.
Well,
And I loved Weezer through college. Well, still love Weezer too. And
I dig Weezer too, but I was going to say I'm sitting in Sacramento right now where Cake is
yeah,
from. So,
nice. Yeah, Cake was like I could just about listen to most every album and just let it roll.
oh,
It's one of my favorite groups. And then for some reason, whenever I felt sad, I'd put on Jars of Clay, which is
okay.
like this rock, and I guess they're kind of Christian too. I don't know, but
I
I don't
remember
know
the
why.
hit. I don't think I listened to the whole record.
I just will listen to that all the time whenever I didn't feel good. But that was my three.
Nice.
Um, as an adult, what have been some of your favorite albums?
Yeah. One that I always go back to, I listened to it on a drive the other night. I've known about it for a long time, but it still sticks with me, is the Paul Simon record, Graceland.
Yeah,
That's a real all-timer for me. Very chill, always calms me down. The last couple years, I've been diving deeper into jazz because I've been learning piano.
yeah, yeah,
I'm only about 4 years in, but I've been studying it fairly intensely. And so I've been listening to a lot of piano players, especially guys like Red Garland. Red Garland's piano, great record,
yeah.
and Sonny Clark. So I'd say that's a lot of what I listen to in my pleasure listening these days.
Nice. One. So after college, I was married really quickly. Kids came really quickly. So I was trying to think of what some of my albums were when I wasn't consumed with job and family. But one that stuck out, this is going to make you laugh. It's an
Sure.
album I keep going back to in a group is Tenacious D.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
Uh, yeah, that's been
Hilarious.
one. Once a friend of mine turned me on to that, and I was like blown away. I was like, "Who is this I'm listening to, and why have I not heard this before?"
Totally.
And
Yeah, I remember they had their HBO show, I
yep,
think, when I was in college. It must have been. And we laughed so hard at that. And then their record came out a few years after that. And I ended up seeing them at some point in my 20s. I can't remember all the details. But yeah, they're great.
yeah, that was one of my favorite ones. Was Tenacious D. I loved it. Um, let's talk about some fun questions. What's been your one of your all time favorite albums to review on the podcast?
Well, going into the big ones is always a lot of
Yeah,
fun. So we did Abbey
right.
Road for our 150. And
Yeah,
I gotta be honest, I've been listening to the album my whole life. I've been reading about the album my whole life, but I was still amazed at how much I learned by really diving deep. And everyone that's doing that is just so excited because we all feel like we have a strong amount of knowledge about what's being talked
yeah,
about. So those are always really fun, certainly. And then the other ones that are really fun are the ones where we just crack jokes at the artist's expense. I got to be honest.
right.
I don't I want to be, and I'll cite an example in a second, but I want to be clear, like I don't really agree with internet culture of just tearing things down. I think if you're going to say you
Correct.
don't like something, I think you need to have a underpinning for that. Why
Right.
or why not? And similar for if you like it. That's what I would say the premise of the show is, and we try to do that. But that said, some stuff needs to be laughed out. So we did a Kid Rock album that is on the list,
Ball
and
with
we
the
had a
ball,
great
the
time with
bang, the
that. And
bang,
yeah,
diggy, diggy.
there
I
are a
don't
few
think
other
I've
ones like
listened
that.
to his album. I mean, just like the radio hits.
Yeah, it gets pretty rough in there, but we had a lot of fun at Kid Rock's expense. So
He's got a couple of gems, and then the rest is just gravel.
sure, yeah,
Yeah,
and so yeah, so kind of one side of the coin or the other is
right.
fun. But every week I learn something. So yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a ton of fun, man. So maybe you've already answered this question.
Yeah.
album got the worst review from your group?
You know what? I wouldn't say it was Kid Rock. We in the early day, the one that jumps out when you say that is an album by a woman called Nana Cherry,
Yeah,
and the album's called Raw Like Sushi. And we did this pretty early in the podcast run, first 35 episodes probably.
yeah.
And so to be fair to anyone going to listen, it is definitely rougher around the edges. We've evolved a lot since then, but I that stands out to me as the worst material that could have
Uh,
made this list. I do not understand at all.
all right, I'm gonna have to go listen now
Just
for
punish yourself.
sure. So check it out because I know the name, but I can't get the music to pop in my head. But yeah,
Yeah, her hit was called Buffalo Stance.
Buffalo Stance. I'm gonna go check that one out. Um, so also looking at your group that runs the podcast, you guys also have a band called the Chop.
Yeah, the Chop was our initially was our band in our 20s that we were all in
Yeah,
together and we cared a heck of a lot about. And this is before a lot of adult responsibilities set
right,
in.
right,
We
right.
toured a bunch, all that stuff. And then we kind of split up to different parts of the country, continued living our lives. And so the Chop became a creative collective and a record label. So we still
Yeah,
occasionally get together and do one-off concept albums that we release through the Chop. Like for instance, the
yep,
recent release was an Arby's heavy metal concept album called Ghost
yes,
Beef.
yes. I
And
was listening to some of that. I was going to
yeah,
talk about a couple things.
yeah, totally. And we have another one queued up for probably later this year that has a Ghostbusters theme, totally different
Nice.
genre. So, but in addition to that, we're just trying to build a brand that like supports. That's the production company's name that produces the podcast. It's also the record label where we print vinyl records from friends and acquaintances and other music we like and try to distribute that. And it's more of an ethos at this point, if you will. But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, definitely check out. At least I saw it through Spotify, but I guess it's other places too.
sure, it's
Um,
everywhere.
the Chop. There's some fun listening in there, and most of it, well, a lot of it, the your stuff is a little heavier, which I really liked. But there's a kind of a variety of stuff in there, of rock stuff to listen to. So definitely
Yeah,
check out the Chop. It was fun.
we flip around because I've personally been in several bands with a few of the guys, trading members occasionally. We've now produced like 6 or 7 records under different names. And so in the show notes of all our podcasts, we always publish a playlist that just has kind of our greatest hits on it of all the bands. So there are different genres of music in there, but they're all having something to do with us writing and producing them. So it's been fun. For instance, my co-host Tom and I actually have another band called the Beverly Crushers. That's sort of the other
Yes.
going concern that
Yeah.
is a
Long live
Star Trek: The
Star
Next
Trek.
Generation
Yeah.
tribute band. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I was listening to some of that too. That's great work.
we actually just wrapped tracking for a follow-up to that record Wednesday. And so I'm excited to issue a follow-up later this year. But I think one of my big aesthetics is taking a silly concept and executing it with deadly seriousness. So that's kind of what
Yes.
these concept albums are about. Like, oh, that's kind of a silly concept. And then you listen, you're like, wait a minute, they took this like really seriously. So yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah, man. It is really fun stuff. So definitely check them out. You can just type in the Chop, or you can put 1001 album complaints in there too, and all that stuff comes right up for you, real easy. It's definitely, especially if you're a rock fan, it's good. It's good fun listening, man. I really liked it. Um, so your band, are you guys still spread out, or do you record together or virtually? How does that work?
We record together, even though we are spread out. So we'll tend to. There's 2 of us, myself and my co-host are based in California, pretty close by. So we see each other regularly and do stuff. But for instance, we might all get together for a weekend somewhere in the middle of the country, record a
Yeah,
bunch of tracks, and then kind of retire to our separate homes to fine tune them and
right.
add little bells and whistles and things like that. So
Well, everybody better have their A game for that weekend. That's takes a lot of work and planning to get everybody together.
well, that's my job. I'm the Paul McCartney of the group, I'd say,
Yes,
which is
everybody
which
needs
is
a
to say
Paul
I'm the boss,
McCartney.
and they get mad at me sometimes.
Ah. Yeah, it reminds me that quote from your podcast. I guess it was the Abbey Road one where it said Paul McCartney and John Lennon said that if George Harrison ever wrote a better song or than them, then that was going to be the end of the Beatles.
Yeah, that was the secret pact they made at the
That was
beginning
a
of the
secret
Beatles.
pact. No more Beatles if George Harrison wrote a better song than them.
Yeah.
That would be funny if that was slightly true.
Yeah,
Or one of the reasons why they never came back together.
could be.
Yeah,
Or that or heroin. It's one of those.
I vote on heroin. That's for sure. There's a lot of that going on too. What is an album you guys are, or at least you are, looking forward to reviewing that hasn't been done yet?
Oh, I'm gonna say
Tenacious D.
I don't know if that one's on there. I just put the call out for, as we're taping this, I put the call out for what we're calling a glaring omission, something that's not on the list.
Right.
But I threw a couple of my own personal picks out to the world, and I'm asking some of the listeners in our Patreon community to vote on them. And so far, the album that's in the lead, which I'm very excited about researching and doing a podcast on, is JC Superstar, the original concept album.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love it. That'll be great. All right. So, Rob, we're getting towards the end here, and I asked everybody the same little questions at the end of the podcast. And
sure.
It's cool to see what everyone says. What's your favorite smell?
Ooh, I'm going to go grilled cheese.
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, what's your favorite sandwich?
I like all I'm from the sandwich belt of America, so I really have love for a lot of sandwiches. So I'll go cheesesteak.
Cheesesteak. That's a good one for where you were born.
Sure.
What's your favorite kind of drink?
I like coffee quite a bit.
That's a staple here in the Miller house every morning. That's my job. First thing I do when I get out of the bedroom, make the coffee.
Heck yeah.
If you, what does a dream vacation look like for you?
We go to a new city in the world that I haven't been to yet. And I don't have anything planned. I just get up in the morning and I go look for a place to have coffee, and I just walk around and think my thoughts.
Ooh, that's a good way of doing it. Go somewhere you've never been without a plan and just explore and soak it in. I love that idea.
Yeah.
Who is the most famous person you've ever met?
I ran into Tom Waits at a bar in San Francisco.
Nice.
At a show. He was there to see, I think, his son's band or his son's friend's band, and I was there to see my friend's band. And we were up on the balcony of this tiny, tiny club in San Francisco called Hotel Utah, and he was up there, and we talked very briefly.
Sweet. That's a good person to meet there. What is one memory that will always stick with you forever?
The first time my band in my 20s went out of town really early in our career, we did a road show. We went to Oregon and we played a great set, or what we thought was a great set. I think we were great.
Yeah.
People were into it. And then I remember the bartender, or the door guy, handed us, I don't know, $120.
Yeah.
And this, they hadn't closed the bar yet. I think we were the opening band. There's another band on. He hands me $120. The sign above the bar says $1 Jack Daniel's shots. And I just go, shots? I need 120 shots on this bar. Everyone in the bar is doing shots with us.
Oh my God. I love it. I was wondering if you were going to say 120 shots later.
It was a wild
I don't
night.
remember much, but I know I got them all, everybody's shots. I love it.
Exactly.
Well, Rob, thanks for coming on the show, man. This has been great. Everybody check out Rob's podcast, 1001 Album Complaints. Drop them a message and let them know what album they should do. It's a lot of fun. And Rob, this has been wonderful. I appreciate you coming on, sir.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. Really appreciate it.
Remember, folks, find what makes you happy and get to it. There's a lot of life out there to live, so make it a good one. Be kind, be nice, be good, and everybody have a good week. Thanks for listening to You're Still Doing That. If you love the show, check us out on our website, www.yourstilldoingthat.com, and leave a tip. You can also find the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok.